Hi, I'm Lance Wallnau, and welcome to Firewall. This is the beginning of an entirely new season for us. As you're looking at the news cycle, you get to see the ever-increasing nuttiness of what is taking place in the new Democratic Party, and then you get to watch the complete paralysis that seems to be exhibited in the new Republican Party, because all things are new, and what you're seeing is stages of harvest. Now think about this for a second. Jesus promised that when harvest time happens, the tares and the wheat come to full maturity. Now this is a wild thought. Now just bear with me for a second. What if there's harvests in some places that happen before others? Now I know the parable that Jesus talked about referred to a great end time harvest, and well, maybe this is God's end time harvest. But here's the thing about a tare and a wheat that you got to catch. Tares are planted, look a lot like wheat until harvest time. Then wheat starts to look different, tares start to look different. Now you can tell the difference between the two. And what's happening right now in America is we've had, you got politics and Republicans and Democrats. How many of you know that the Democratic Party of John Kennedy or Walter Mondale, or Hubert Humphrey, I'm aging myself here, people, even LBJ, wily fox that he was, the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton is not the Democratic Party right now that is weaponized Marxist activist groups, dividing America based on race, dividing America based upon straight or homosexual, dividing America based upon generation, millennial against older. We're watching right now the tares and the wheat distinguish themselves in terms of what is righteous behavior and unrighteous behavior. What I want you to do is to just take a breath, because what's happening now is the maturity in the nation. And I do know that we're already in a judgment cycle, but it's not a judgment that I would say is from God. I think it's a judgment of consequence. You know, if you keep eating those tubs of ice cream at 1 a.m. when you're waking up and can't get to sleep, don't be surprised if you start putting on tons of pounds and arteries get clogged. That's not God judging you. That's called ice cream choices. And so America's been a self-indulgent, I'm sorry to say, spoiled a nation at peace with the world and not thankful to the God that gave it so much. And it's just the cycle. It's as ordinary as Israel. Blessing, prosperity, peace, then corrupt leadership, and then chaos, and then judgment, and then cry out to God, and then back to blessing and peace, and then corrupt leadership. The difference is I really do believe we have good leadership in Donald Trump. But you wouldn't know that because the entire weaponized system is against him. I'm going to go over here. I got 1 minute here left. Watch me in 1 minute explain how the world works. So here's the United States. Like, Lord, what's going on? Well, every single city that's in disruption right now is run by one of those parties. And the church is over here getting invaded and attacked and assaulted. You got family over here, which is, cowering, basically. I see those pictures of husbands and wives that are trying to defend themselves. Where did this all come from? It's the education mountain. And this is the part that we're going to have to talk about. We're going to have to get educated today. The education mountain is what actually went into the families and weaponized young people so that they would be part of the overthrow of government in the future. Now, my guest today, meek and mild-mannered businessman that he is heavily involved with the political arena. He's going to be sharing with us insights you need to have on politics. I asked him to talk about 5 distinguishing areas. We need to have our own education mountain here on this program so we can take back the future. Let's meet Steve Taylor. I have a very interesting program. This is a little bit different than usual. I have a guest with me who is Steve Taylor, one of the individuals that I look to for insight on what's going on in the government mountain and politics in general. The interesting thing about Steve is he's not just talking from the political perspective, but he's got a business background. His family has the innovation that was USA Today had rated as one of the top 25 cool ideas in 1989. They began to introduce salad in a bag. And so now the CEO of Fresh Express is sitting here with me to talk to us about what isn't in the bag, which is going to be the future of America. And by the way, you got that company up to 500 million in sales.
We did.
Well, that's quite a staggering figure. There.
Yep. From 10 years, we were one of the leading categories in retail around the country for 5 of those 10 years. And yeah, it was an exciting ride.
It's amazing. And what's funny is I did not know that. I only knew you were educating me on political things. So did you always have an interest in the political?
I had an interest in politics, but between running a business, family,
Sure.
church, just didn't have enough time. So I stayed involved until we sold the business in 2001, and then got involved in politics after that.
What he said is what I want to talk about. Between church, running a business, and family. You hear those wholesome American values? You could be a Christian, you could love your family and be dedicated to your job, your work, or if you're an entrepreneur, getting your company back on its feet right now, and be one of the 30 to 35 million people that are allowing the country to be lost because you're not actually engaged politically. And so tell me that number again.
After reviews of the most recent elections, there's anywhere from 30 to 35, 39 million evangelical Catholic people of faith who are not engaged. They don't vote. They might be registered, but many of them are not even registered. And then there's some that are registered and just not engaged.
So I'm just saying, this is so crazy. This is like being on an airplane and Al-Qaeda is trying to break into the cockpit and you're not even helping the cabin crew stop them because you don't think it's your calling to do it. 30 to 35 million evangelicals and pro-life Catholics.
Yep.
That if 10% of them were engaged, America wouldn't be in the threat that it's in. History would be altered.
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
maddening.
We're looking at, trying to find anywhere between 1 million and 5 million, what we call disengaged faith voters this election cycle to get engaged. Because we know the Democrats are doing a phenomenal job of getting their voters registered, engaged. They're changing. We saw with one of the positions that Nancy Pelosi took in the recovery packages to change to go to either all mail voting in or what they want to do is change it to where you can register and vote on the same day. And quite a few states like Michigan, some of the key battleground states have same-day voter registration and voting, which just begs for bad things to happen.
Terrible things to happen.
So I believe, that part of the reason that I've gotten involved, particularly over the last couple of years, is to really find these disengaged faith voters, find them, and then figure out how to get them engaged. And there's some good organizations out there that are doing that. And we believe that as people of faith, that at a minimum, you should vote. Learn about the issues and vote. And then hopefully people will get more involved and more engaged. And we can, like you said, that you don't have to turn too many faith voters out to actually change the results of voting and then also just the general culture.
I mean, I'm telling you, we got, I won't mention who said what, but I always feel like that rabbi in Seinfeld, who says, let's say that a young woman named Elaine has a friend named George, but these friends of mine that have ministries and they have these schools and stuff, they're telling me as much as 30% of their Bible school students were pro-Bernie Sanders socialists, that we have not done a job of educating even Christians that are zealous in Bible school. Forget about being indifferent spiritually. They're actually zealots. And they don't even have a worldview on government tyranny versus liberty. And so there's
we don't even know how our people are going to show up.
Right. There's a huge opportunity.
I like the way you put it. There's a huge opportunity. Well, we're going to get some of those sites for our people so that they can get engaged. Because I'll tell you something I found out. This is very shocking. I've got to confess this. I just had 25,000 names on a database. That's people that I've got in my world that were looked at by a friend of ours who said I have 3,500 of them are not voting and not registered to vote. It's shocking to me, as politically incendiary as I can get. I'm so incendiary, Christians don't even want me around them on calls. And our people, we have a percentage of them that aren't even engaged in voting.
Well, and we need to understand why they don't. I mean, the main reason they don't is they think their vote doesn't matter.
Okay,
it just doesn't count.
All right.
So part of it is, communicating to people and saying, yeah, your one vote maybe doesn't matter. Your $10 to a candidate, maybe that doesn't matter. But when you add that up with a million other people and a million other people's $10, I mean, that's how Bernie Sanders ran his race. He had a couple, 2, 3, 4 million people that would contribute $10 a month to him. And when you do that, those numbers add up significantly. And so the key is for all of those of us who are believers to get engaged, to get involved. The other reason that believers, politics is dirty, it's partisan, it creates disunity, which it does. It does all of those kinds of things, but that doesn't mean that we should just leave the playing field, because the opposition is not leaving the playing field, and they stay on the playing field year after year after year. And we think it's our job is to figure out how to get as many of our folks on the field who care about biblical values, conservative biblical values.
Well, there's a couple of subjects I want to get into here, and one of them has to do with this idea of conservative biblical values, and it's the courts, because you helped me understand something about how the courts work, but I think sometimes we have to go back and admit that my audience, like myself, is still getting educated. I think a lot of us just did not understand. So, for instance, one of the great threats to the future of the nation is apathy regarding the Supreme Court, because we think, we got 1 or 2 guys in there, or we got some time. But in fact, tell us about the philosophy of packing the court. What does that mean? Because Democrats, I'm hearing about the Electoral College they want to change. I'm hearing about write-in ballots, which we know can be falsified, and you can have all kinds of people voting. Like a friend of mine said, he used to be a Democrat, and their motto was vote early and vote often. But in this case with the courts, there's history that tells us that if you can't get the majority, just create more judges. So how does that work? Is that pretty much what packing it is?
Yeah, that's exactly what packing it is. And up till President Trump, when he came into office in 2016, one of his commitments to his voters was to put what I call constitutional textualist judges on the courts, both at the Supreme Court level, the circuit courts, and the district courts. And the Democrats have tried to, as we've seen, fight each one of those appointments. But Mitch McConnell and the Senate have been able to, because the rules were changed from a supermajority, 60 vote, to a 50 majority vote in the Senate on judicial nominees. And so what's happened is the president and the Senate have put a slew of what I would call good judges on the courts. The Democrats see that. So what happened was the Democrats have been legislating through the courts for the last 30 or 40 years. I mean,
we have to go back and talk about this for a second. First of all, you said something interesting. You didn't say conservative justices, which is what I'm used to hearing. You said constitutional originalists.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So that means that they're basing their decisions, their judicial decisions, based off the Constitution and the intent of the Constitution. And people can say, well, that was written 200 years ago. Well, yeah, that's true. But we have means by which we change the Constitution. They're called constitutional amendments. They're hard to do. It's 2/3 of the Senate, 2/3 of the House, and 3/4 of the states. But it was designed to be hard,
so that you couldn't mess around.
So you couldn't mess around with it. And so a constitutional textual judge will put out rulings that I would probably disagree with as a conservative, and a liberal might disagree with some of the things that they do. I happen to believe that our values are found more within the Constitution. And we believe that the Constitution is and the Bill of Rights is what makes America unique, what makes America special. And it's those things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to bear arms. All of those things are under attack. And the correct way to change those is legislatively, which you see some states doing, and you see.
So let me say this, because this is where I'm afraid that the semantics slides over people, and we don't quite get it. So let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
What happens in like the 7 mountains that I teach is that within the government mountain, you got the judicial and the courts and that part of the process. So if, with an atmosphere of political correctness, if a congressman wants to skirt the issue of, they got people that are like pro-LGBTQ, and then you got their constituents that aren't, and let's say they want to avoid an environmental controversy or a gender controversy, they will, lacking character, which is characteristic of the collapse of culture, they'll kick the can up so that they'll avoid having to make a legislative decision and a position that could maybe lose votes, and they throw it over to the courts, because it's much easier to let the court take the heat than you. Yep. So we have had this going on for years, which is what we mean by judicial activism. If you can't get something done the right way, which is by electing an official and persuading a state to do something, you just kick it over to the court, and the court will do it for you.
Right. Yep.
And with devastating consequence. But why does the Supreme Court accept those kinds of cases?
Because of the types of judges that were on the court.
There you go.
So they are more of they come from what they call a living constitution. It's kind of like, we're talking, from a faith perspective, they're people who are biblically oriented, and they go to the Bible for values and culture and things like that. Or you can or there's folks who go to the Bible and say, well, they didn't really mean this, and times have changed, and so now it's kind of like the Living Bible. Well, I correlate this. To me, they're the same. The folks who are solid biblically, look at things a certain way, and then the people who want to kind of fudge what the Bible is saying, they'll kind of go and find something within the Bible that supports the direction they want to go.
Sure.
And the same thing happens with the Constitution. So that's why I try to stay. The courts are not supposed to be liberal or conservative. They're supposed to be constitutional.
Right.
And so both sides use the language. And it just, we all fall into it just because it's easy.
All right, explain the circuit courts. Because this is just saying, I just want to go there for a second, because I'm telling you, a lot of my people don't understand it because I don't fully understand it. Right. So I understand now more about the Supreme Court. Now, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals was always the infamous liberal court, but if there's 9, I mean, there's a number of other courts too,
Yep.
right?
So the ninth is the most overturned court in the land.
What does that mean?
That means that decisions that they make that end up at the Supreme Court, more of their decisions get overturned by the Supreme Court than any other circuit court in the land. So that's why they're known as kind of they're known for that. So what's happening is President Trump has been appointing new circuit court judges as they retire, and over time, and the opportunity between now and 2024 is that projected there will be enough retirements in all of the courts, including the Ninth, that there will be a majority of Republican-appointed judges on each of these circuit courts. Lord. Now, that doesn't mean, again, it doesn't necessarily mean how they're going to rule, because like I said, hopefully they're going to rule based on the Constitution, which you and I may not agree with that decision, but then it's our job to go to our legislature and say, if they come up with a ruling that's constitutional, or debates on the Constitution, then it's our job to go change the legislation.
What percentage of the cases is tried by the Supreme Court versus circuit courts?
Well, the Supreme Court's less than 2%, and the circuit court's roughly 98%. And the district courts are below that. I don't know the numbers there, but the two key courts are the circuit court and the Supreme Court. And getting back to your question, the Democrats are threatening, or what they're saying to their voters, because they recognize what's happened. They recognize that they were legislating through the courts. Now they've lost that ability because of Trump and the Senate. And so now they're saying, okay, if we are in power, we are going to pack the courts. They're talking about adding DC and Puerto Rico as states. They are talking about getting rid of the Electoral College. And I don't know, I'm not a legal scholar, so I don't know which of those they can do and which ones would end up, they'd probably all end up in some kind of court, but that's the direction that they're going. And so that's why holding the Senate is really important in 2020, because even if we lost the presidency, but if you still had a majority in the Senate, you could at least stop them from packing the courts.
You know, there's nothing more important in life than the anointing. The Apostle Paul said that I have been abased and I have known how to abound. I know how to be down, I know how to be up, and it's all through Christ who strengthens me. That's the anointing. And I want to ask you to participate in the anointing right now in a unique way. And it's the anointing that comes by connection, by sowing into ministry that brings revelation to you. You increase the anointing in your own life for revelation. As you sow into the soil of that which is ministering to you, you actually connect with that anointing and get more of the teaching in your spirit. Would you partner with me and help us with our message? LanceWallnau.com/partner. LanceWallnau.com/partner. We need your help.
One question for you. We're looking at how close we came. Congress was how dangerous it is to have a weaponized, ideologically bizarre Congress, all pursuing for 3 years the removal of the president. The Senate, by just a fragment of votes, protected the office of the president. I mean, this could have been this. You talk about a civil war in terms of division. We could tolerate a lot in this country, but if the left has succeeded in the deep state of forcing Donald Trump to make a Richard Nixon type exit to the helicopter and take off and go back to Florida, it would have been badness. But the Senate was the firewall, and there was only a couple of people there. So what's the status of the Senate for the next cycle?
So starting right now, there are 53 Republican senators. Alabama has a Democrat that was elected, I think in 18. That one's going to be, the Republican is going to win that race in 2020.
And this is where Sessions is running, and Donald Trump still doesn't forgive him.
Correct,
for screwing up.
So Sessions is running, Jeff Sessions is running against Tommy Tuberville. He's a former coach, I think it was at Arkansas, I believe.
Think he's going to win?
I don't know. Whoever wins that is going to win will win the general.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't have a good feel for. I just know my take is whoever wins the primary in that, which is I think this month, will win the general. So that puts us up to 54. So then, sitting right today, there are 5 Republican current senators that are considered at risk of being knocked out.
Now, this is where, if you're an intercessor type person, hopefully you're politically engaged too, but this is where, so give us the 5 states where we ought to have a red alert going on here.
Okay, so it's Cory Gardner in Colorado, Martha McSally in Arizona, Tom Tillis in North Carolina, Susan Collins in Maine, who's not the most conservative, but she voted well. She's the one who got Kavanaugh through. And then Steve Daines up in Montana. Those are the 5 most at risk current sitting senators. And then the other pickup, other than Alabama, is Michigan with John James, who's a great, solid believer, loves God, loves his family. Huh? Yep, he's awesome. He is.
So he's a West Point grad.
He's the real deal. West Point grad, family guy, married, he's got 3 little boys. Fought in Iraq or Iran.
Wow.
Just a really good guy.
But the social justice Catholics and the African American community actually there's strength for pro-life, isn't there, in the minority communities that we don't even think about?
There's a large group of people who are socially, culturally, biblically conservative. So they're pro-life, pro-religious freedom, school choice, prison reform is huge for that group of people. But they're not conservative economically. They tend to be moderate to liberal on the economics. So the traditional, typical Republican messaging of smaller government, fewer regulations, lower taxes, that segment of folks, they don't care about those kind of things. It doesn't affect them. And so the Democrats have sold them that they care more, that they love them, and they're going to take care of them economically. President Trump was able to break through some of those folks in 2016, in particular, by talking about how your jobs have been leaving the country, different things that have gone on to cause economic issues for those folks. So he connected with them on an economic level, and basically he said, the Democratic Party really has not delivered for you. And so some of that group started to believe that, but there's an opportunity to speak to that group of people on the cultural issues that they really care about. They do care about family. They care about family formation, even though families are falling apart all over the country. They recognize the need for good, strong families. And we need to figure out as Republicans how to speak to those folks.
Well, yeah, and oh my gosh. And I think that we talk about a revival, an awakening, a visitation. America does need a spiritual awakening. At the same time, we need a reformation. And I can't believe how the time has flown with this interview with you. I'd love it. It always happens when I talk to you. I want to encourage those of you that want to be active and engaged. Go to asoneamerica.com. We're going to be picking up the mantle for unifying American Christians, sage cons, pro-life Catholics, and people that love America and don't want to see it fall apart. And I think there's a number of people that are going to be in these rallies that are Trump followers who actually have an affection for God. Like you said, 70% of America, it's God. They love their nation. The flag isn't something they want to burn. They're not angry with anybody. They don't have a racial problem, and they're tired of being picked on. And I think that there's a harvest in the middle of them. Go to asoneamerica.com, sign up, join us, and we're going to be fighting to see the churches open, businesses open, and America open for destiny. And thanks again, Steve, for dropping by the studio.
Thank you.
On next week's episode of Firewall with Lance Wallnau.
We're seeing incredible messages of hope come from around the world of good things, great things people are doing and God is doing. And we need to learn to focus on that too.
For more information, visit lancewallnau.com.